You've checked the locks. You've turned off the lights. You told yourself, you're safe, but somewhere, in the quiet of a house that should have been empty, something moved. Tonight, on The Scary Collector, we bring you 3 true accounts, told by the people who lived them, 3 nights when being home alone became something they will never, ever forget. Stay with me, turn off your lights, and whatever you do, don't look behind you. Story 1. The Man in the Basement. Submitted by Rachel T. Location, Rural Ohio, 2019. Part 1. The Empty House. Rachel was 23 years old when it happened. She had just moved back in with her parents after finishing her nursing degree. A temporary arrangement, she thought, just until she found a job and saved enough for an apartment of her own. Her parents' home was an old 2-story farmhouse on the outskirts of a small town in rural Ohio. The nearest neighbor was about a quarter mile away. The nearest gas station, almost 4 miles. It was the kind of place where you could scream and no one would hear you. But Rachel had grown up there. She knew every creak in the floorboards, every rattle the pipes made in winter, every shadow the old oak tree threw across the living room walls when the moon was full. The house didn't scare her. It was November. Her parents had driven down to her aunt's place in Kentucky for Thanksgiving weekend. Leaving Thursday morning, back Sunday night, Rachel had decided to stay home. She had a shift at the hospital on Saturday, and besides, she liked the quiet. She liked having the house to herself. She remembers thinking, as she waved goodbye from the porch, that this was going to be a perfect, peaceful weekend. She was wrong. Part 2. Thursday night. Thursday passed without incident. Rachel heated up some leftovers, watched a couple of episodes of a show she'd been meaning to catch up on, and went to bed around 11. She slept fine. The house was quiet. Friday was the same. She ran a few errands in the morning, came back, did some laundry, spent the afternoon reading. By evening, she was completely relaxed. She poured herself a glass of wine, made pasta, and settled in for the night. It was around 9:30 when she first noticed it. She was sitting on the couch in the living room, feet tucked under her, TV on low, when she heard a sound from below. A soft, deliberate sound, like something being dragged across a concrete floor. The basement. She muted the TV and listened. Silence. She told herself it was the water heater. Old houses made noises. She'd heard it 1,000 times. She unmuted the TV. 10 minutes later, it came again. The same sound. Slow, deliberate. Something moving across the basement floor. This time, she stood up. She wasn't panicking yet. She was a practical person, a medical professional, but she was paying attention. She walked to the basement door, which was just off the kitchen, and pressed her ear against the wood. Nothing. Complete silence from the other side. She stood there for a full minute, her hand on the doorknob. Then she pulled away and went back to the couch. Probably just the pipes, she thought. Old houses. She finished her wine and went tea. Oh, bed. Part 3. Saturday morning. Saturday morning. She woke up at 6 for her shift. She showered, got dressed, made coffee. Everything was normal. She grabbed her bag, her keys, and headed toward the front door. That's when she saw it. The basement door. She had left it closed. She was certain of it. But now it was open, just a crack, maybe 2 inches, enough to see a thin sliver of darkness beyond it. Rachel stopped. Her hand tightened around her keys. She stood in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at that door. Then she told herself the same thing she always told herself. Old house. Old hinges, The latch was probably loose. She crossed the kitchen, pushed the door shut, and heard the click of the latch engaging. She went to work. She told her coworker about it on their lunch break. Half joking, half not, her coworker laughed. "Get a cat," she said. "They open doors all the time." Rachel laughed too. She drove home that evening feeling fine. She was tired from the shift. She ate a quick dinner, checked her phone, texted her mom goodnight, and went to bed early at 2:17 a.m. She woke up. She didn't know what woke her. It wasn't a sound, or if it was already over by the time she opened her eyes. She just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, with a feeling she could not explain, a cold, electric certainty that something was wrong. She reached for her phone on the nightstand. The screen said 2:17, and then, from directly below her bedroom, from the basement, she heard it again. Not the pipes, not the water heater, not the house settling. Footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate footsteps, moving across the basement floor. Part 4. The call. Rachel did not move. She lay perfectly still, her phone clutched in both hands, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. She was listening so hard she could hear her own heartbeat. The footsteps stopped. A long silence. Then, a sound she recognized immediately, the slow groan of the basement stairs. One step at a time. Someone was coming up. Rachel was out of bed before she even made a conscious decision to move. She crossed her room in 3 steps, locked her bedroom door, pressed her back against it, and dialed 911. She whispered her address. She said she thought someone was in her house. The dispatcher told her to stay where she was. Stay on the line. That officers were on their way. She heard the basement door open. Not the creak of an old latch swinging on loose hinges. Not a draft. A deliberate, slow opening. She heard the hinges. She heard the wood. She heard footsteps in the kitchen. She pressed herself harder against the bedroom door. Phone to her ear, listening to the dispatcher's calm voice while every other part of her focused on the sounds moving through her house below. The footsteps moved into the living room. A long pause, like whoever it was had stopped to look around, to look at the wine glass she'd left on the coffee table, the throw blanket on the couch, the evidence that someone lived here. Then the footsteps moved toward the stairs that led to her bedroom. Part 5. The officers arrive. She heard the first step creak under weight, then the second, then the third, and then sirens, distant, then quickly closer, then right outside. Blue and red light swept through the gap under her bedroom door. The footsteps on the stairs stopped. For a moment, nothing moved. Then she heard quick footsteps. Faster now. Back down the stairs, through the kitchen. And then a sound she couldn't quite identify. A crash. Maybe the sound of something heavy. Then silence. She heard the officers announce themselves at the front door. She unlocked her bedroom and called down to them. Shaking so hard she had to grip the railing, they searched the house, the basement, the yard. In the basement, they found the window. It was a small utility window near the ceiling, the kind that swings inward on a hinge. It had been latched from the inside when her parents left. Now it was hanging open. Someone had reached up through the gap from outside, worked the latch from an angle, and gotten it open. They found where he had been sleeping, in the far corner behind the old water heater, a flattened cardboard box, a sleeping bag, a plastic grocery bag with food wrappers inside, cracker boxes, a few cans of soup. Someone had been living in her basement, not just since Thursday. The food wrappers, the worn-down cardboard, the officers estimated he'd been there for at least a week. maybe longer. He had been there before her parents left. He had watched them pack the car. He had heard Rachel say goodbye. He had known she was alone. They found him 3 days later, sleeping in an abandoned barn 2 miles down the road. He had a record. He had done this before in other states, other houses, other basements. He had a particular way of choosing his spots. Rural homes, older foundations, small windows. Rachel does not live in that house anymore. She never went back after that night. She told me she still sleeps with a chair under her doorknob. She told me she checks her basement every single night before she goes to bed. Every single night. Story 2. She was never alone. Submitted by Marcus D. Location: Suburban Atlanta, Georgia, 2021. Part 1. The setup. Marcus was 31. Recently divorced. Living alone for the first time in his adult life in a 2-bedroom townhouse on the north side of Atlanta. His daughter stayed with him on weekends. With her mother during the week, Monday through Friday. The townhouse was just his. He liked it. For the most part, he'd set up a home office in the 2nd bedroom. He had his routines: morning coffee, an evening run, dinner at his desk while watching something on his laptop. He was adjusting. The way people do. He told me the first thing he noticed was small. Almost nothing. A mug. He was particular about his kitchen. Everything in its place, a habit from his marriage. From years of cohabitation. He kept his mugs on hooks under the cabinet. Always the same hooks. Same order. The big blue one on the left for his morning coffee. The gray one next to it. The novelty mug his daughter had painted for him. A lopsided purple cat. On the far right. One Tuesday morning in late February. He came downstairs and found the purple cat mug on the left hook. The blue one was on the far right. He stood in the kitchen for a moment, staring at it. Then he switched them back and forgot about it. Part 2. The small things. A week later. He found the volume on his TV turned all the way down. He never watched TV at 0 volume. He always left it at around 22. The week after that. A window in the back bedroom, the one he used as his office, was unlocked. He was certain he had locked it. He locked every window when he moved in. Because he was on the ground floor and his ex-wife had made him promise. He told himself he was losing his mind. Divorce stress, adjustment, loneliness playing tricks. He relocked the window. In March, his daughter came for a weekend. Saturday morning. She came downstairs before him and called up from the kitchen. "Daddy, there's a cup in the sink." He came down. There was a mug in the sink. Not one of his. A plain white mug. The kind you'd find in an office break room or a hotel. He'd never seen it before. He asked his daughter if she'd brought it up from somewhere. She looked at him like he'd said something silly. "It was there when I woke up," she said. "I thought you left it." He threw the mug away. That afternoon, he walked through every room, checked every lock, looked in every closet. Everything was fine. He convinced himself the mug had been there for weeks. Overlooked. He was a tired, distracted single dad. These things happened. He did not call the police. He did not tell anyone. He didn't want to seem paranoid. Part 3. The camera. In April, a friend visited for the weekend, an old college friend. Staying in the guest room. Saturday night they stayed up late. Had a few drinks. Talked until almost 2 in the morning. Marcus went to bed feeling better than he had in months. Sunday morning. His friend came out of the guest room with a strange look on his face. "Hey," he said, "did you put a camera in the guest room?" Marcus set down his coffee mug. "What?" His friend showed him. A small device, barely bigger than a USB drive. wedged into the corner of the window frame. Behind the curtain, the lens was barely visible. The light was off, but when Marcus's friend had pulled back the curtain that morning, the morning light had caught the glass. Marcus called the police. The officers came and searched the house. They found 2 more cameras, one in the living room inside the smoke detector, which had been replaced with a dummy device, one in the kitchen, attached to the back of the refrigerator, angled toward the door, not in the bedrooms, not in the bathrooms. The investigators would later note that this was deliberate. The cameras were positioned for surveillance, not voyeurism. Whoever placed them wanted to know when Marcus was home, when he left, what his patterns were. All 3 were wireless. All 3 were transmitting to a receiver somewhere nearby. Part 4. What they found. The investigation took several weeks. The cameras were common, off-the-shelf models, the kind sold on the internet for home security. The transmission was encrypted, but the investigators were able to trace the signal. It led to a car, a dark blue sedan, often parked in the strip mall across the street from Marcus's townhouse. Sometimes there for hours, sometimes overnight. They identified the owner, a former coworker, a man Marcus had worked with at a previous job, someone he'd had a conflict with over a promotion, someone who had been passed over, someone who had blamed Marcus, someone Marcus had barely thought about in almost 2 years. When they searched the man's apartment, they found a laptop with hundreds of hours of footage from Marcus's home. They found notes, detailed, meticulous notes about Marcus's schedule, when he woke up, when he left, when his daughter was there, when she wasn't. They found a copy of Marcus's key. He had made a copy of Marcus's key. The investigators believe he had been in the townhouse on multiple occasions while Marcus was away. They believe he placed the cameras himself, on a day when he knew Marcus would be at work. They believe he had been watching for months. The mug in the sink, the switched mugs, the unlocked window. The investigators had a theory about all of it. He had been inside, and he had left those things deliberately, not because he was careless, because he wanted Marcus to know. He wanted Marcus to feel it, the uncertainty, the doubt, the creeping, maddening feeling that something was wrong but you couldn't prove it. It was a form of psychological torment, and it had worked. Part 5. Aftermath. The man was arrested and charged. He pleaded guilty and received a sentence that Marcus describes as inadequate. He served less time than Marcus spent in therapy trying to feel safe in his own home again. Marcus moved. He changed his locks. He changed his name in the directory. He became meticulous about who had access to his space. He told me the hardest part wasn't the cameras. It wasn't even knowing that someone had been inside his home. The hardest part was the realization that the feeling he'd dismissed, that nagging sense that something was off, that small wrongness he couldn't name, had been real. His instincts had been telling him the truth, and he had talked himself out of listening. Trust your gut, he told me. If something feels wrong, even a little bit, even something as stupid as a mug in the wrong place, take it seriously. Tell someone. Don't convince yourself you're crazy. He paused for a moment, because maybe you're not. Story 3. Knock Knock. Submitted by Yvonne M. Location: Pacific Northwest, 2020. Part 1. The Storm. Yvonne lived alone in a rental house on the edge of a small town in Washington state. The kind of town where the grocery store closes at 8 and the cell service disappears when it rains. It rains a lot in that part of Washington. She had moved there for a job, a remote position, data entry. The kind of work you could do from anywhere. The rent was cheap. The scenery was beautiful. And she was 26 and newly independent, and she thought she wanted quiet. It was the middle of February. A storm had been building since the afternoon. The kind of Pacific Northwest storm that doesn't announce itself dramatically, just settles in, heavy and dark, and stays for days. By 8 in the evening, the rain was coming down hard. The wind was in the trees, and the power had flickered twice. Yvonne had candles ready. She had a battery lantern. She had learned, her first winter there, to be prepared. She was on her couch reading when the knock came. 3 knocks, slow and deliberate, at her front door, at 8:15 on a stormy February night. Part 2. The Visitor. Yvonne lived alone, and she didn't get unannounced visitors. Not ever. Her nearest neighbor was an elderly woman who kept to herself. The road to Yvonne's house was a private lane off the main road. Easy to miss if you didn't know it was there. She put down her book and looked toward the door. She had a peephole. She also had a chain lock, a deadbolt, and a new habit, born from nothing she could specifically point to, just a feeling she'd had since moving in, of always locking the door the moment she came inside. She got up quietly and crossed to the door. She looked through the peephole. A man, standing on her porch, rain soaking his jacket, head slightly down. She couldn't see his face clearly through the distorted lens. But he was tall. He stood very still. She didn't open the door. "Who's there?" she called through the wood. He looked up. "Sorry to bother you." His voice was muffled by the door and the rain, but she could hear it. Even, "My car went off the road back there. I need to use a phone." She thought about it. She was not a cruel person. She understood that people had emergencies. She had driven these roads. She knew how bad they got in a storm. A car off the road at night in the rain was entirely plausible. But something held her in place. A feeling she could not name. "I'm going to call someone for you," she said through the door. "What's your number?" A pause. "I don't know it by heart. It's in my phone. My phone's in the car." "What about a tow company? I can call for a tow. If you could just... I really need to come inside for a minute. Get warm. My hands." "I'll call 911, she said. "They can send someone to you." "What road were you on?" Silence from the other side. Then he knocked again. 3 times. Harder. Part 3. The Long Night. Yvonne backed away from the door and called 911. She told them she had an unknown man at her door. She gave her address. The dispatcher asked if he was threatening her. She said not in so many words. But something felt wrong. The dispatcher told her to stay inside, keep the doors locked, and that a deputy would be there as soon as possible. In that part of Washington, in that weather, that meant at least 20 minutes. She hung up and stood in the middle of her living room. She heard him on the porch, not walking away, just there. She could see, through the small gap in her living room curtain, his shadow in the dim porch light, standing. After a few minutes, he knocked again. She didn't answer. "I know you're in there," he said, still calm, that same even, quiet voice. "I can see your lights." She moved to the kitchen and got the largest knife from the block. She turned off the living room light. Then she crouched against the kitchen wall, out of sight of every window, and waited. She heard him try the front door, the handle moving, slowly, carefully, and then stopping when it didn't give. She heard him step off the porch and move around the side of the house. She heard him try the side window. She pressed herself tighter against the kitchen wall. She could hear her own breathing. She could hear the rain. She could hear, very faintly, the sound of him moving around her house, testing each point of entry, methodical and patient. She called 911 again and did not hang up. She heard him try the back door. She heard him try the back window. And then she heard something that made her stop breathing entirely. She heard him find the basement wind. Ow. Part 4. The Deputy. The basement window was small and rusted. She had never been able to get it open herself and had stopped thinking about it, but she heard the wood strain. She heard the scrape of metal. She heard him working at it, and then she heard tires on gravel. Headlights swept across her kitchen, sealing through the back window. The deputy. She heard the man stop. A moment of stillness, then footsteps moving fast. Away from the house, around toward the back of the property. Where the tree line started, the deputy announced himself at the front door. She let him in. He called for backup and they searched the property with flashlights. They found where he'd gone into the trees. They found where he'd parked. Not on the road where he'd claimed his car went off, but on a fire access trail behind the property, hidden from the house. No car accident. No broken down vehicle. He had parked there deliberately. He had walked to her house from the BA. Part 4. The Deputy. The basement window was small and rusted. She had never been able to get it open herself and had stopped thinking about it, but she heard the wood strain. She heard the scrape of metal. She heard him working at it, and then she heard tires on gravel. Headlights swept across her kitchen, sealing through the back window. The deputy. She heard the man stop. A moment of stillness, then footsteps moving fast. Away from the house, around toward the back of the property. Where the tree line started, the deputy announced himself at the front door. She let him in. He called for backup and they searched the property with flashlights. They found where he'd gone into the trees. They found where he'd parked. Not on the road where he'd claimed his car went off, but on a fire access trail behind the property, hidden from the house. No car accident. No broken down vehicle. He had parked there deliberately. He had walked to her house from the back. The deputies tracked him through the woods for almost 2 miles before losing him in the dark and the rain. He wasn't found that night. Part 5. The Investigation. He was identified 9 days later, when a woman in a town 40 miles away reported the same thing. A man at her door, alone, claiming car trouble. In the middle of the night, her neighbor had caught part of it on a security camera. The plate matched a stolen vehicle. The face, when they circulated it, came back as a man who had been wanted in 2 other states for residential burglary and aggravated assault. He had a pattern: rural areas, isolated homes, women living alone. The car trouble story. A calm voice, patience. The investigators believe he had been watching Yvonne's house for at least several days before that night. He knew the road. He knew her schedule. He had chosen his moment. A storm, limited visibility, compromised cell service, a slow police response. He was good at this. He was caught 2 weeks later, attempting the same approach at a farmhouse in Oregon. The woman who lived there had a dog and a shotgun, and he didn't get past the porch. He's serving time, multiple charges, multiple jurisdictions. Yvonne moved out of that house within the month. She doesn't live in an isolated area anymore. She lives in a city now, in an apartment with a doorman and a security camera in the elevator. She checks it every night before she goes to sleep. She told me that what has stayed with her, more than the fear, more than the memory of crouching in her kitchen with a knife, is the voice. "It wasn't what I expected," she said. "I always thought I'd know. I thought danger would sound dangerous, but he was so calm, so reasonable. If I hadn't trusted my gut, if I had opened that door just to be polite, just to not seem rude to a stranger." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. 3 women, 3 houses, 3 nights when being home alone stopped feeling safe. And yet, all 3 of them survived, because they listened, because they paused and paid attention and did not let politeness override instinct. There is a lesson buried in each one of these stories. If you're willing to hear it, check your basement, know your neighbors, trust the feeling that something is wrong. Even when you can't explain it, especially when you can't explain it, the things that keep us safe are rarely dramatic. They are the locked window, the chain on the door, the call made before you had certainty, the second where you stopped and thought, wait, if you're watching this at night, if you're home alone right now, I want you to do something for me. Check your locks. All of them. This has been the Scary Collector. If you have a story of your own, something that happened to you, something you witnessed, something you've carried around and never quite been able to explain, reach out, send it to us. We read everything. And if tonight's stories reached you, if they stayed with you, if they got under your skin the way they got under mine, please subscribe, leave a comment, share it with someone who likes to be scared, or better yet, share it with someone who doesn't. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you next time.